Hello, is that Jake?
This is Jake.
How the hell are you today, Mr. Jakey Lee?
Old and tired. Although, yeah, I've learned how to say it in Spanish. I'm going to learn it in every language now.
Is that right?
Yeah, all my friends are tired of hearing it.
You're obviously not that old and not that tired, because Red Dragon Cartel are back, and that was a band that saw you stepping back into those shoes again in 2014, and I was wondering why the timing felt right for you to do that then.
Well, I think it all kind of winds back to where I was maybe not happy, but complacent with not being in the music business, because it's an ugly business, and so I was good with that. But I did start to get a little itchy after 10 years or so, and I was kind of jamming with bands every once in a while here in Las Vegas. And well, eventually Kevin Churko, the producer, he initially contacted me because he was doing Ozzy's albums. He did his last, to be honest, I haven't listened to Ozzy in a long time, so I don't know which albums he did, but I know he did a couple of albums with Ozzy. And he initially contacted me, because he also lives in Las Vegas, about what it would take for me to come back and play with Ozzy. But those talks didn't last long. I mean, because basically I said, look, all I want is songwriting credit for the stuff I wrote on Bark of the Moon. I said, that's all. If they do that, I'd be happy to, see what could happen with Ozzy and me all these years later. But, yeah, that was never going to happen. So then he asked me if I'd be interested in doing anything. And he had a studio. He said, look, you just come into my studio, put some ideas down, because he produces a lot of bands. He said, I have a lot of musicians to access whatever you might need. And just go in there and do one song and see if it feels right. If it doesn't feel right, no problem. I'm not going to charge you for the time. But just see what it feels like. So the first song that I actually put down was Feeder with Robin Zander singing on it. And after I did that one song, I got all excited. I hadn't been excited about music in a long time, and that excited me. So I decided to do a whole album.
People missed you. Did it surprise you that there's a real hardcore fan base for your playing and for Badlands and for those two Ozzy albums? Did it surprise you that the love was still there?
Yeah, it did. Because, I'd been out of the limelight for a long time. At least 10 years, maybe 12, maybe even 15, depending on how you put it. But, I was surprised because people move on, I kind of treated my leaving the business as a death, and people get over it, I mean, I just lost a dear friend recently, and you manage. You get over it. You move on, and I just figured that's what was going to happen with me. But yeah, it was very surprising and very heartwarming that people out there that actually still gave a shit about me. I mean, I figured I was long gone, but yeah, it's a very nice feeling.
You're reading the second Red Dragon Cartel release. You must be excited to get that one released.
I'm curious to see how people react to it. For me, it's a more honest representation of my music than the first Red Dragon Cartel album. I mean, I'm proud of the first album, and there's good songs on it, good performances. It's not the way that I'm accustomed to doing an album. Usually it was with Ozzy, with Badlands, it was a band, and you would go into a rehearsal hall, and everybody'd set up, and then basically I would present my ideas, and we'd all work on it, and it was a much more organic sort of process. Because, that way, you can tell immediately if something's working or not. If I have a riff, and I play it, and then right away the band comes in, and you can tell if it's working or not. Whereas the first Red Dragon Cartel album was a sort of a piecemeal process, whereas they took the files from my computer, because even though I was out of the business, I still played music, I still wrote music, and because of the advent of the computer and all the audio software that was with it, you can do things by yourself, which you couldn't do before. So I continued to write music, and I still loved music and was writing it. Anyway, so I had a computer with a bunch of ideas on it, And those ideas were accessed by Churko and made into songs, but not in a way that I had previously done it.
There is definitely a looser vibe on this one. I mean, you can hear it on Crooked Man, and I was picking up stuff like there's influence, to me, I can hear Bowie in it, I can hear psychedelia, I can hear the Beatles in it. It's definitely a looser album, isn't it?
Yeah, and all those things you just mentioned I can see it. Yeah, it's Bowie especially on the last song. Yeah, for this album, like I said, on the last album it was all based off of files I had on my computer that I've been working on, and this one was I kind of went back to my roots while writing the album. I was listening to a lot of Bowie, and just a lot of the stuff that I grew up listening to, which had a huge impact on as far as the songs on this record.
Obviously, people are going to be picking up those licks and those solos. And I noticed you're using a few pedals going on. Are you exploring kind of new guitar textures?
No, I've been into pedals for a while. I think in the early 90s I started collecting them. And I did a record for Japan, a solo record that was all instrumental.
Yeah.
And for that record, at that point in my pedal collection, I had, I think, 87 pedals.
Wow.
My goal on that record, A Fine Pink Mist, was to use every single one somewhere. So that record has a shit ton of pedals on it. Pedals are fucking great. They give you a whole new perspective on what you're playing. Almost like picking up different guitars. You can play the same song with an old Strat. It's just going to come out different. Picked up a Les Paul. So yeah, the textures, I don't have most of my pedal collection anymore, but I have a friend who does. He also has a bunch of guitars. He lent me all his guitars and all his pedals when I was doing this record. And there's some really cool old shit that I got to play with, like a Benson Echo, and the Octafuzzes. What was that? Old I don't even know how to say it. It's Japanese. Shinya, whatever. All these old pedals, and I had all these old heads, old guitars. I really went back to my roots for this record. So it does sound different than the first one.
I suppose something that people will be wondering is, does the famous Charvel, the white pearl, does it feature?
No, not so much. I didn't even. We recorded all this in Pennsylvania and on Anthony's ranch studio, and I didn't bring it. I don't really bring that out. It's actually kind of unplayable these days.
Don't tell me that.
It was probably unplayable back in the 80s, but it was just the guitar I was used to. It has a really narrow and skinny neck. I mean, do you play guitar? It sounds like you play guitar.
I do play guitar, yes.
Okay. On that guitar, and I dealt with it back then because it was my main guitar, but on this guitar, it's hard to play an open D chord on it because the neck, it got shaved down by Charvel way back when, and it's so narrow at the nut that if you try to play an open D chord and you're fretting the G string on the second fret, right?
Yeah.
The open D won't sound. You really have to know exactly how you're going to finger it for it to work. Anyway, my point being, since I put it into retirement and I haven't played it a lot, for me, it's a really hard guitar to play.
It's kind of nice to know in a way that only Jake E. Lee can play even a D chord on that guitar. Surely you're the only guy that should be allowed to play that guitar.
I showed Charvel because they wanted to make a replica, but no, you can't make a replica. Nobody's going to want it. Nobody's going to play it. They said, sure they will. And I showed it to them. They went, holy shit. They said, how in the fuck did you play this thing? But anyway, to answer your question, no, I didn't even bring it out to the ranch.
2014, I crawled out of a tent very early in the morning to go down and watch Red Dragon Cartel open up the Donington Festival, and I wondered what it was like for you to step out onto that stage 28 years after playing a headline slot there with Ozzy on the Ultimate Sin Tour.
You were there. Well, it was fun just being able to, it wasn't that many people because it was early in the day. But it was to play on a stage that size. Yeah, many years later, it was really cool. And I have fond memories of the Doningtons that I had done previously. I think one was with Gary Moore. That particular Donington, I remembered I went up to watch, I think YNT played. So I went up to watch them, and as I was going towards the stage, I passed the tents of Gary Moore and Van Halen, and they were both warming up in their tents. I could hear them, and it's a little intimidating, hearing Gary Moore just doing his thing, and then walking by Van Halen's tent, hearing him do his thing. And I just remember it was a really good day because I walked by their tents. I said, fuck, what the hell? How am I gonna play any good? And I said, you know what? I'm not even gonna warm up. I'm not gonna warm up. They're warming up. I'm not warming up, because then if I go out on stage and I suck, in my mind, I didn't warm up. So I didn't warm up, and I actually played really well. And at one point, I looked over and I saw Eddie and Gary on the side of the stage watching me. They both came up afterwards and said how well they thought I played, and that was actually one of the highlights of my career was having Gary Moore and Eddie Van Halen both approach me after the show and compliment me. Thin Lizzy, I listened to a lot of Thin Lizzy, by the way, while I was writing this record.
Was there any particular reason, or you were just getting into those old tracks?
Yeah, old stuff I used to listen to, but I always loved Thin Lizzy. I thought Robbo was a very underrated guitar player. I loved his playing. Yeah. Well, their first guy, what was his name? You probably know.
Eric Bell.
Yes, he was really fucking good. And I don't even know what he did after that, but his time in Lizzy he was a really fucking good guitar player. So yeah, Lizzy is known for their guitar players. I mean, even Snowy White.
Chinatown, great album, yeah.
Chinatown. Okay, between you and me?
Yeah.
I've been keeping it secret. I have actually been telling people that I wrote the riff for Havana. The Havana riff. Everybody's saying, wow, what a riff. Where'd that come from? I've been hinting that all I did was I'd been listening to a song all day earlier before that. When we came into the rehearsal room, I was playing it, and we started jamming on it. And then at the end of it, I went, fuck, I wish I could play a riff like that. I wish I could come up with something that cool. Anthony looked at me and said, well, why don't you? I said, oh, what? What am I going to do? Just play it backwards? And then I kind of played it backwards, the fucking riff. I was like, holy shit, it worked. But because you're Irish, tell you, I haven't told it. I've told that story to people, and they've asked me, well, what was it? And I haven't told them. I'll tell you, just because you're Irish, it was Chinatown.
Wow.
If you think about it, right? And then Anthony said, play it backwards, and I went, what? You can see where I got it, right?
That's incredible.
I thought you deserved to know because you're from the same country.
Moving on a little bit, I've got to ask you, out of the two Ozzy albums you did, which is your favourite?
Oh, shit. I can't really, they're so different, both of them. And Bark of the Moon was my first recording, major recording anyway. So that'll always hold a special place in my heart. And the fact that Bark of the Moon, which I wrote musically, is still such a iconic Ozzy song. So that's cool. But it's hard for me to differentiate between the two albums as far as what I like most. I will say that for me, Killer of Giants was one of the highlight achievements for me as far as songwriting, because musically I always loved that song, and with the whole intro to it, I think there's like 1.5 to 2 minutes where nothing actually repeats itself. It's just a constantly moving forward piece of music, almost orchestral, and I can't say which album I like better, but Killer of Giants is, I consider musically one of the best songs I've written.
The one song, obviously, that jumps out from the second album is Shot in the Dark. But I have to ask you, because everyone wants to know, how the hell are you playing that? Because people are going, it's open tuning. What are you doing?
Yeah, it is, because the song was originally written in A. So you have the open strings that you can chug along with. The day before I was going to go into the studio to record my parts, the producer, Ron Nevison, told me, oh, by the way, Shot in the Dark is in B now. And I was like, wait a minute, what? He said, yeah. We moved it up so Ozzy's vocals would work better. So I had that night to figure out how to chord everything and fret everything, and it was just a lot easier for me to keep the open string, the open A chugging string. So I tuned that up to a B, a whole step, and I tuned the E, I believe, also a whole step so that they would match each other. And yeah, so it's standard tuning for E, B, G, D, and then the A and the E strings are up a whole step. It made for some interesting chord inversions, so it worked out really well. And during the Ozzy tours, I would have a guitar specially tuned that way. On the last Red Dragon Cartel run, we popped the song out, and I play it with a standard tuning, so you can still play it with standard tuning.
Obviously, your time with Ozzy Band came to an end. And is it true that you found out via a telegram and that you had no idea that it was coming?
I had no idea it was coming, but it wasn't by telegram. I don't know. I mean, it was the 80s. I guess people sent telegrams back then.
Yeah.
But I'd never heard of it. No, I didn't get it via telegram. When I heard about it, it was that night, Sharon Osbourne, this is all in L.A., Sharon Osbourne called me and said she wanted to have dinner with me. I said, okay. So we went out, and she was buying, so it was a fucking great dinner. And then we went back to the hotel, and we talked for a while. And I suppose there was clues in there. He was talking about how, someday, Jake, when you have your own band, I think her major piece of advice was to be on time, because I'm notoriously late for everything. And she said, when you're a leader of a band, you kind of need to set an example, and you need to be on time. And I said, yeah, whatever. And that was the only clue I had, really. And then I came back home, and my roommate at the time was also my guitar tech. And he came back from the Rainbow, and he'd seen Phil and Randy Castillo at there. And he said they came up to him and said, so, what are you going to do now that Jake's out of the band? So he ran back home and told me and said, dude, did you just get fired? And I went, no. He said, I think you did. No, I just saw Sharon. I just had dinner with her, and we talked and talked. I think she would have told me if I was fired. I said, well, that's not what Randy and Phil said. I was like, oh, come on. So I picked the phone up, and I called Sharon back and said, I just heard the weirdest rumor. And then she broke down and said, oh, yes, it's true. And I said, what do you mean, I'm fired? And she went, yes, that's why I took you out to dinner. But you never said anything. She said, I know. I just felt too bad, and I just couldn't do it, which people might find hard to believe because Sharon Osbourne, I mean, come on, she's pretty ruthless. But we got along very well when I was in the band. I considered us friends back then. And just the fact that she was supposed to fire me and couldn't, it's hilarious in retrospect.
Yeah.
That night it wasn't so hilarious. Yeah. No, I found out I was fired through my roommate.
When's the last time you saw Ozzy face to face then?
Holy shit. That was before I was fired.
Right, wow, so you haven't seen him since 87, 86?
No, the closest I came was when when I was just getting Badlands together, and we were having a meeting wherever the manager's hotel was, somewhere in L.A., and I remember the drummer looked over my shoulder and said, hey, Oz, and I thought he was just kidding. And then I turned around and I saw Ozzy, and Ozzy kind of skittled off quickly. And I turned around and looked over my other shoulder, and that's the only time I've ever met Zach. And I got up from the table. He looked a little like he didn't know what was coming. And I walked over to him. I said, hi, I'm Jake. And he goes, I know who you are. Well, I just want to wish you the best of luck. And if there's anything I can ever do for you. And that was the only time I ever met Zach, and that was the closest I came to Ozzy after he fired.
Would you like to get up and play those songs one more time now that he's retiring?
You know, he says he's retiring, and this isn't the first time I've heard it. Yeah, wasn't it in the 90s where he said he was going to retire?
Yep, that's right.
I think he genuinely means it. I think he when he announces it, I think he's adamant that he believes it will be his last tour. But then I think he just hangs around for 6 months at home and gets bored, and then he makes another record. So, is this his last tour? I don't know. It could be. And I did actually offer, not personally, but through my management, said that what would be really cool, I think, would, if you could have Red Dragon Cartel open for the tour, and obviously that's better for me than for him, but in payment of doing that, I said I will go up and I'll play a couple songs that, you know, like Bark of the Moon, Ultimate Sin, whatever. One of the songs that I actually played with him back in the day. So I'll go up on stage and do that. So the offer was out there, but it wasn't taken.
Someone pointed this out to me earlier today. They said to me, can you ask Jakey Lee, is it a coincidence that the riff to Ronnie Dio's Don't Talk to Strangers sounds a lot like Bark at the Moon, given that you were briefly in the Dio band?
It is a coincidence. It's on Wikipedia if you look it up. And who was it that just said that? Somebody on one of the YouTube channels that goes over guitar players. I watched him 'cause I was the subject of it, and he even said that to this day, Jakey Lee says that he wrote that riff, and I didn't. I've never said it. I don't know where that rumor came from. I've heard the song, and I can understand because it's got the 16th note going on the bottom, but no, I had nothing to do with that song, and I don't claim to have written any of it, and it is basically, it's a coincidence.
Finally then, just to wrap up, when are we going to see Red Dragon Cartel back out on the road, and will that include dates in the UK, if not Ireland?
I don't know. We are currently planning on going back out on the road in late February. That's in the U.S. And then we're hitting Japan, and we're trying to line up a tour going straight to Europe. I don't know if that's working out. To be honest, I didn't really do that well last time I was there in Europe. I thought there was, on the last tour, I thought there were some gigs in Ireland and in Scotland, and they got canceled due to lack of sales. So, I mean, because last time I remember playing there was in the 80s with Ozzy, and I remember there was a wall around the theater or wherever Ozzy were playing, and we all had to get checked for bombs, and I don't know if it's still like that there, is it?
No, it's not like that anymore. You can walk down the street, you'll be fine.
Well, regardless, I mean, just I love Scotch and whiskey, and I don't mean to offend you by saying Scotch.
Not at all.
But, because mainly I love Irish whiskey, but there are certain kind of Scotches, like Lefroy and the Islay Scotches. Love those, but if I can't find those, I always go to the Irish. I like the Irish a little better than the Scotches. So, anyway, my point being that I was really looking forward to drinking some whiskey in Ireland and Scotland, and more than anything, that broke my heart that I couldn't do it.